Hello and welcome to our YouTube channel, RV Tips from Jan. Today's topic, the Perils of Boondocking Part 2. I hope you had an opportunity to watch our first video on this subject where we detailed some of the hazards that we can face as we are traveling down unpaved roadways to our boondocking destination. If we're not careful, this can lead to a potential accident and or permanent damage to our RV. So I have some questions to ask you as we're getting ready to talk about this subject in part 2 of this video. Does your RV have off-road tires? Does your RV have an upgraded suspension system? Does your RV have raised axles? And finally, does your RV have reinforced body structure? If the answer to any of these questions is no, then your RV, like ours, was not designed for any off-road activities. Now, does this mean that we cannot go boondocking? Certainly not. Many of us still go boondocking with our recreational vehicles. But the fact is, we do have to take extra precautions and do the appropriate planning. So that's what this video is about today. Additionally, I'm going to pick up where we left off in part 1 and show you how, as a metallurgical engineer, we studied some of the failure analysis that can occur in the structural parts that are under our RV. So let's get started. We need to be mindful of the rough road that we can encounter when we're boondocking. Even when taking extra precautions, boondocking can result in permanent structural damage to our RV. This can be damage that we aren't even aware of, but it can affect the longer-term performance, the resale value, and eventually the life of our RV. In the first video that we did on this subject, we mentioned that permanent structural damage is certainly a possibility, and as a metallurgical engineer, this is something that I did study. All structures have very minute cracks in them. These cracks typically are almost microscopic and are not a problem under normal wear and tear conditions. But when you're boondocking, the stresses and strain that is put on the underbody, the understructure of your RV, are significant. And those cracks can start to grow and propagate. They start out, and this represents, if you will, the understructure or beam support of your RV. These cracks start out very small, and with time and continued stresses grow. And eventually, as shown in the lower left-hand portion of this video, they can grow to where there's a failure. Now, I will add that under normal conditions, our RVs over the expected lifetime would not experience any of these kind of failures. But when we get to unpaved roadways where we're boondocking, this can become a serious challenge. Now, you've all seen, and I've seen videos of fellow RVers who are going boondocking, and they're so excited to get there that they're videotaping their experience, and they're going down these unpaved roads at 25, 30, 35 miles an hour, sometimes even faster. And without realizing it, they are putting a lot of extra stress on their RV. Sometimes that manifests itself in the form of the refrigerator door popping open and the contents falling out, and cabinets emptying out onto the floor. If that's ever happened to you, that should be your first signal that you've put excessive stress on your RV. And there's no question that some boondocking locations are more challenging to access than others. We need to plan for this and keep this in mind. And the key when we are driving on unpaved roadways is to slow down. As we slow down, we reduce the stresses on all parts of our RV, whether it's inside the box or outside and the underbelly of the structure. And under the heading of what are some additional things that we need to be aware of when we're boondocking, certainly spotty cellular service is one of those. This can be a real concern when we're camping in remote, difficult to reach locations. Now, my wife and I have camped in locations with no cell service, but we're aware of that and we plan for it. You need to do the same. Have a contingency plan ready in case you have an issue where you need to get help. The road less traveled may be more inviting for boondocking, but it also can be much more treacherous. Out in these locations, a breakdown can result in a costly tow bill and actually ruin your holiday adventure. We all know the saying, fail to plan, plan to fail. That's certainly no truer than when we're getting ready to boondock. Can you imagine going down this narrow road and coming up to this sign, low clearance, 7 foot 2 inches? What do? If you see the grade on each side of this roadway, it's very steep, almost impossible to do any kind of a turnaround. We need to plan ahead of time so that we don't run into these unforeseen circumstances. Now, in addition to planning our trip in terms of our travel portion of it to avoid treacherous, unpaved conditions, we also can be doing some other things to make our RV journey that much more enjoyable. One of these is to have family or friends join us on our boondocking experience. Now, this is not always possible, but when it is, it gives you the peace of mind that you have someone else traveling with you in case you happen to have a mechanical failure, either with your RV vehicle itself or with your tow vehicle. When boondocking for an extended period of time, it's always good to make pre-arrangements for a check-in with a family member. This is a good lifeline in case something happens where we're unable to make a contact away from our boondocking location. And how about keeping our pets in mind? All of us have well-equipped first aid kits in our RVs. What about for our pet? There are pet first aid kits that are available. And this is a great thing to have in case our pet happens to have an injury. So in conclusion, boondocking is certainly a great way to explore the great outdoors, but it requires careful planning and preparation. We want to take care that this adventure does not become our next expensive insurance claim. Well, thank you so much for watching. If you found this helpful, please check that subscription button. And just as important, please continue to be safe and stay well. Thank you.